it's just, a week is only 7 days, and that's just a short time. Just a short time. Because weeks go by very, very, very fast. All right. This Sunday, there's an effort being made to promote what they're calling Pulpit Freedom Sunday, with it being less than 30 days or close to 30 days from our election, and a lot of the I guess I'm going to call them just Christian religious people, they're putting together and trying to promote this Pulpit Freedom Sunday, to where just letting the pastors know that they're supportive. If you want to preach about the election and anything in particular, and anyone in particular, and as I was reading the website, and thank you, Evan, for sending it to me, because it led me into some things that you know what, it's kind of amazing how many things and how many efforts and how many times we just get off track. We forget, or we don't, not really necessarily forget, but we allow something to fill the space that really should be reserved just for God and God alone. Mm-hmm. And as I was thinking about the Pulpit Freedom Sunday, you know what? Every Sunday is a Pulpit Freedom Sunday, because if I just preach God and everybody worships God, the rest of it gets taken care of. And the president and all that will happen just exactly the way that God would have it to happen, if we would just do like the Scripture says, and if my people which are called by my name would just turn from their wicked ways and just seek my face. That's the dead level best that I could come up with on Pulpit Freedom Sunday. Amen. Let's just seek God. Let's just put, you know, I just love Donald Trump's little phrase, let's make America great again. And he just got one word wrong. If he'd just got one word different, he'd have had it perfect. Let's make God great again. Amen. And if we would just do that, America would be great all by itself. Yes. Because America would be full of God's people. So as we think about the election and the times coming up and the times we're living in and things that are going on, let's just remember we've got to put God first. We just got to put God in that front place, and remember that every spot that I give away to something else is a spot that I don't have, that I'm taking away from God. And I just would like to make my life and my time all focused on all of it, all the time, only for Him. And we think, well, that's kind of difficult and that's kind of hard to do, and you know, there's just so many things going on, but that's exactly what those things are. They're just things, they're just distractions, they're just things to take time away from God in our lives. And so as we focus on those kind of things, let's just remember there's a lot of people that we learn from. And you know, when we want to learn how to do something, if we want to experience something new, I've never been snow skiing. I've been up on the slopes in the summertime, and I don't like the way it looks. It's too steep in the summertime. I really want to see it when it's slippery. It's bad enough when it's dirt. When it's just snow, I don't know that I want to be up there. But you know, if I was going to go snow skiing, I wouldn't just go running up there and grabbing me a pair of skis and throw them on and jump off and see how it works. I'd find somebody that knows how to do it. I'd find somebody that could teach me how to do it on a little bitty hill, maybe pull me along with a rope or something until I get the hang of it. But I would, you know, when we're going to learn something new, we seek out somebody that has some experience in it, somebody that can explain to us the way this happens and the way this works. And if you want to get through it and be successful at it and enjoy it, you need to really know how to do it right. So we seek out different places and different people to teach us how to do different things. And the same thing is true in our spiritual walk with God. We read about the disciples and how they lived their life and what they did, because they were just real people like us. And Jesus just chose them, Peter and Paul and all the disciples. Jesus just picked them, just regular, ordinary, everyday fishermen people. He just picked them to follow Him. And He taught them that we could learn from them how to follow Jesus. Amen. Yeah. And we read about Paul, and we read about Peter, and we read about, you know, we read about Paul's Damascus Road event in Acts 7. You can read about Paul and how he came to know the Lord through his part in his time. And then Peter and his walking on the water. That's what our Wednesday night Bible study, the driving point of that is Peter's walking on the water. And that you read about in Luke, and then also James, of course, the brother of Jesus, his book, and then Judas and his betrayal that we read about, and then in the book of Luke also. All these guys, we read about and we learn how to live our life for Christ by their example. But you know, that's only the top four that everybody knows about just off the top of their head, and kind of their story. We know about Paul's Paul's events and how his life went. We read about it a lot. We study about it a lot. We hear lots of preaching about it. The same with Peter and with Judas. But you know, there was others, 8 others. And one of them I want to think about today was Thomas. Because I think, I know for myself, and a lot of times in a lot of people's life, we're just like old Thomas. We kind of have the same frame of mind because of the events that take place in front of us. We have the mindset that old Thomas. Now Thomas was kind of a pessimist. He saw the cup always half empty, not half full. You know, or I got that backwards. He always saw it was only half full. It was always the negative side. He was the pessimist. He was like, well, things just ain't working out so good. One of the first things we hear about from old Thomas is in the book of John. Book of John, chapter 11 and verse 16. Now, here they are. They've threatened to stone Jesus. And now he's going to go back because Lazarus has died, and they're going to go back. And Jesus is telling the disciples, okay, we're going to go back because Lazarus passed away. And then the disciples say, well, don't you remember when we were there last time they wanted to stone you and kill you? And he said, no, but we're going to go back. And now here's old Thomas. Old Thomas goes, well, let's just read that. John 11 and 16. And then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples. Now here they're all getting ready to go. And he goes, let us also go that we may die with him. This is all, we're just going to go and we're going to all get killed. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, he's just like, okay, I'll just give up, Lord, I'll just go with you. He's got that negative attitude. It doesn't look right to him, and he's following the negative attitude. Yeah. Even though he's been walking with Christ, he followed Jesus for 3 years. And he watched all the things that Jesus did, but he still didn't have really any faith in what Jesus would tell him. He still had that doubt. He still had that fear that something ain't going to be right. And sometimes we get that fear within ourselves. We get that fear something's not right, and it keeps us from doing things that maybe God's calling us to do. And we can relate it because it's like, well, I got this for sure fear that if I go do this, something's not going to turn out right. And we'll even give God the credit for giving us that fear. Well, God's just telling me I better not go. But see, God doesn't operate in a realm of fear. That's not how he does things. And Thomas didn't really recognize that at this point. But you know, Thomas, he went ahead and went, and he begins to see things happening. And he's there when Judas betrays him. He's there when they come and get Jesus. And Thomas now is beginning to watch these events portray themselves in his life, and he's watching things happen. And he's watching Jesus. Now here he is, he's been learning how Jesus is, and he's been watching Jesus and how powerful he is and the things that Jesus has done. And now all of a sudden, things are beginning to get not so good. And he watches them take Jesus away, and then he watches as they put him on trial. And you know, here he is at a distance off. He's like, wow, I didn't think that this was going to happen this way. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You see, a lot of times in our life, the same thing. We're like, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look like it's supposed to happen this way. And he watches as they crucify Jesus. He stands on a hill far off, and he's watching it as they crucify Jesus. And they nail him to a cross. And he's standing out there watching. Now he's a carnal man, just like all of us, and he watches this happen, and he's thinking, okay, you know, everything that I had hope in, what little confidence I did have, they just nailed it to the cross. And I want to stand here and watch this happen. I'm going to sit right here, and I'm waiting. You know, maybe in the back of his mind, he's waiting for some miracle to happen. Because Jesus has told him that he would come again, that he would raise from the dead. And he's watching this, and he's like, I don't see any way out of this one. They did more than he expected them to do. And then he watches them take him down off the cross, stab him in the side with a spear, and then take him off the cross. And then they take him and put him in the tomb, and they roll the stone away. And I just put yourself in Thomas's, what little faith he had is now like, okay, so it's time for a new plan. It's time for something different, because this is over. All this that I put my faith in, all this that I've been following, everything that I've been doing for all this time, it's all come to an end. And sometimes in our life we get that same idea that, you know, this ain't turning out. I've got to find a new idea. I've got to find a new plan. because what I'm seeing it happening just isn't the way I picture it. I think about how many different churches there are today that are split from one church from another because somebody's like, oh, things just ain't happening the way I think they need to be happening. We need to do it different. And so Thomas kind of withdraws himself. And Jesus appears to the 11 because Thomas is not there. When Jesus appears the first time after when he comes back, after he raises from the dead and he appears to the disciples, the 11 are gathered, but Thomas isn't there. Thomas's hope is gone. He thought, well, there's no point in the 12 of us meeting anymore because Jesus ain't here. And all the things that we were going to do and all the man we were following, the man that was leading us, he's gone. So it's time for a new plan. So let's go to John chapter 20. And this is when Jesus appears to the 11, and it'll tell us right here, chapter 20, 19 through 24. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where all the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in the midst and said unto them, Peace be unto you. And when he had so said, he showed unto them his hands and his side. Then were the disciples glad when they saw the Lord. Then said Jesus to them, Peace be unto you. As my Father has sent me, even so send I you. And when he had said this, he breathed on them and saith unto them, Receive ye the Holy Ghost. Whosoever sins ye remit, they are remitted unto them, and whosoever sins ye retain, they are retained. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. Now we read that and we say, okay, but you know, there's a real important aspect right there. Jesus was there with the 11 and he breathed the Holy Spirit on them. And there's one that missed out. There's one that wasn't there. Thomas had withdrew himself. Thomas had lost all his hope. Thomas had separated himself. So many times when things don't look right, when things ain't going right, we separate ourselves from God. And we miss what he has for us. We miss when he comes. We're not there. We're looking for something else. We've given up our hope. We think, oh, this whole world is so bad, and ain't gonna never. You know, the whole election, it really has this year. I don't know if this year is more than most, but really the whole election process distracts so many people away from God. Because we get up the mindset that my decision, what I decide to do, is really important. Well, it really is important if you choose the right choice. If you decide to stick with the 11, if you decide to stick with God, your choice is very important. But when we allow the things that are going on around us, like Thomas, when we allow the things that we see with our eyes and the things we hear with our ears separate us and let us focus on our decision and not what God would have us to do, we get just like Thomas, we miss what God had for us. So it's so important not only to remember Paul and Peter and James and Judas, but you know, there's all those disciples, there's something to learn from each and every one of them. That's why Jesus picked them all. And there's a lesson in each one of them's lives. Now Thomas, here that day that Jesus appeared, he wasn't even there. He didn't even show up. So let's go on. Later on, Thomas's friends, these other disciples, saw Thomas. And they tried to explain to him. You can imagine the excitement in them. You can imagine the passion that they had. Thomas, guess what? Jesus came back. And we saw his hands, and we saw the hole in his hands, and we saw where the spear stuck him in the side. He's back, he's alive. Amen. And Thomas is like, no, I ain't gonna believe that. You're crazy. Now this is Thomas. This is one of the 12. But see, he didn't receive the Spirit that the other 11 received. Yeah. So now he's missing something. There's something lacking in him now that allows him to receive and allows him to acknowledge and allows him to really realize that Jesus is back. And so Thomas goes on and they keep telling him, Thomas, you got to listen. We really saw him. He was really there. Now let's go on and say in John 20, go to verse 25 through 31. The other disciples therefore said unto him, We have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, Except I shall see his hands and the print of the nails, and put my finger in the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. You got to prove it to me. You really got to prove to me that he's back. And after 8 days again, his disciples were within, and Thomas was with them. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst. Notice what he says, the very same thing he said the first time, Peace be unto you. Then saith to Thomas, he turned straight to Thomas. And he said, Thomas, now here he is, he's gonna let Thomas know that he heard what he said. He's going to let Thomas know that his spirit is with him no matter where you are, no matter what you say, no matter what you're thinking. Jesus is going to reveal that to Thomas. Then he said to Thomas, Reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side. Exactly what Thomas said he needed to do. And be not faithless, but believing.
Yeah, amen.
Believe it, Thomas. Come on. You walked with me for 3 years. You've seen all the things that happened. And I told you this was going to happen. And the minute something went a little bit array, you turned your back. And you've missed out. So come and let me prove it to you. If that's what it takes to prove it to you, come and let me prove it to you. Has Jesus ever done that to you in your life? If that's what it takes to prove it to you, come here and let me prove it to you. Step out in faith. Step out. We read on through verse 31. And Thomas answered and said unto him, My Lord and my God. Jesus saith unto him, Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. And many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written, that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. See, it's all that we would believe. Everything that happened in Thomas's life, and in James' life, and in Judas's life, and in Paul's life, and all those things happened so that we would believe. They didn't need to write every detail of everything he did. These are the high points. These are the big things. These are the things that happened to us. These are the things we can relate with, that he puts in the book. That through the things, so through the days that we're like Thomas, through the days when we feel like, this ain't working out. I don't know. And the world would have you to believe that none of this is true. It's just a storybook, and it's a neat storybook, but it's all already happened, and there's nothing else to do. And that's where Thomas was. Well, looks like the story's over. Close the book. But my friends, the story's not over. Amen. It's not time to close the book yet. He's still teaching us, and he's still bringing us to a place that we can walk in that faith. Amen. There's coming a day